So we're here to talk about the work that not just the police, fire and crime officers, it's a whole group of people have been doing around violence towards women and girls specifically. And, looking at this just beforehand, is it right to say it's more appropriate to say the excess violence towards women and girls?
Well, for me, it's about all violence towards women and girls, isn't it? And that's what we're wanting to raise awareness and put out there, that there's so much support services for residents in North Yorkshire and York, and that's why one of the reasons we started up as soon as I came into post. Obviously, it was a manifesto commitment around violence against women and girls and doing some really good work in this space. So we prepared and published a strategy on this, and North Yorkshire Police have got an operational strategy too. And then really we're here now to tell everyone actually about what we've done in the last, under 6 months. Fantastic amount of work, but it's about raising awareness, having those conversations, and about showing and being really open about and pushing out there the support services that are there for victims.
And just kind of winding it back a bit, when we say violence towards women and girls, I know it's easy to, everyone has an image of what they maybe think that violence is, but it also, you're sort of reading through some of the documents you produce, it talks about online as well, so not just in person.
Yeah.
Are there areas to particularly talk about when you talk about violence towards women and girls? Well,
I suppose when you pick up that about online abuse as well, it's about, it affects all age groups, doesn't it? We have our younger members of our community that are online, on social media, that experience that kind of abuse, right the way through to somebody being shouted and abused in the street, misogyny, hate crimes, it spans all age groups.
And the work that you kind of produced, that you're talking about today then, is it just June time this year, isn't it? It's the main body of work.
That's right.
And sort of part of it then has been a process of listening, isn't it? Listening to what women and girls want. Yeah. Could you just explain a bit more about what that process was about?
So it's about going and talking to our communities with lived experience and getting their first-hand experiences about how they felt about the support services that were here, that we have, that we can make them better, and what else was needed. And they were the ones with lived experiences so important to engage with.
And that's not just someone picking up the phone and calling the police, is it? I think it's worth sort of emphasising, isn't it? I think people don't always realise what support services are out there. They think it's always got to go 999 to the police.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if you're in immediate danger, you always call 999. But we do have here in-house our supporting victims team. So, if you're concerned about something that's happened to you or to a friend, you can want that advice, that you can pick up the phone and give them a call. You can also go online. All the details are on my website. But that's such a great commission service, and it helps a lot of victims.
And is that what you term like a sort of a softer reporting of issues? Because I think there can be one of the reasons why people don't call the police, because I think they think it starts a whole chain of events, possibly with social services and can create more problems. And so those other services that you mentioned from the website, are they the sort of starting point then, if you like, to look at support?
They can self-refer, so it isn't just supporting victims. We commission a lot of services, for example IDAS, which they can self-refer into if they didn't want to talk to the police initially.
So then looking at there were sort of 6 sort of key areas then, and the listening to women was probably the first one. I suppose like all crime, ideally you'd sort of tackle the root cause, and that was sort of the second one. But it's such a huge area, isn't it, to look at why someone would do something like that. Is that kind of early days, that area, in terms of getting some progress?
Yes, so as you say, we are in the early stages of addressing the root causes, because we recognise that we can prioritise supporting victims and survivors of these types of offences, and that will remain one of our priorities. But if we don't actually tackle the root causes and we don't start challenging the people that are actually committing these offences, we're not going to make any long-term changes. So part of the work that we're doing that's in relatively early days is looking at particularly young people's attitudes and behaviours. So we worked closely throughout October to raise awareness with young people in particular around issues like misogyny and toxic attitudes towards women, and how even at a relatively young age, talking to teenagers, to boys and girls, about their kind of thoughts and attitudes, that there's some really key messages there even at that relatively young age, and they're such a crucial age group for us to start working with and having these conversations with.
And I think I'm right in saying that there's been other reports done, hasn't there, from sort of school age, where it's shown sort of attitudes and the number of, I think, assaults actually in schools, wasn't it? There was a report that came out not that long ago. So it's kind of well documented, isn't it, from a school age, the problems that seem to be starting at that time.
Well, it's that prevention piece, isn't it, that we're really keen on, and it's working with our education partners that is key to this, isn't it? And it's like top end of primary going into secondary, and that's part of our next steps to do more with going forward.
And does that prevention kind of work, does that also involve the parents as well? Because I know parents aren't always anywhere near as engaged with their children or understanding what's going on. But is that some education for the parents as well?
Yeah, well, I would hope that by working with our education partners, they would look at being able to include the family in that too, and education and raising awareness as well, so it can be reinforced at home as well.
And I know it's sort of a bit of a kind of a social comment then, but what do you see has sort of developed over the years? Obviously, teenagers' lives are very different to what they were 20 years ago. They've got access to much more content, online content and information that's often put out in a very strange kind of way that I don't think they realise the effect that it has on them. I think every teenager wants to think that they kind of know everything, and I'm sure we did when we were teenagers. Is that kind of part of the problem, is the imagery that they see around them?
I think social media has a massive role to play in that, and I think we were just talking about it before that actually teenagers, they're under so much pressure right now, aren't they? And I think they're very open, aren't they, when they play these social media games, and they're just like sponges of teenagers. That's what I always think, especially with, I've got a son and a daughter who've gone through that, and they're just like sponges and they pick so much up. I think there's so much pressure. I don't know if you want to add to that, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. I think things like technology and social media nowadays, there's potential there to do a lot of good, because as you say, they have access to a whole world of information, but equally that can have really damaging effects on them. And I think that's part of what we're intending to do moving forward, looking at creating safe spaces and opportunities for these conversations to happen in the virtual world as well as obviously, in everyday life. And that's going to be really key to us in terms of having conversations with younger people to start talking about their kind of attitudes and beliefs around things like violence against women and girls and women and girls in general.
But on the 6 points, one of the points is to increase public confidence. Is that not just the police but the whole process, that if they actually take their problem, if you like, into that process, whichever route, that they're actually going to see a useful result? How far does that go then? Does that go as far as the court system as well, because that's problematic with the family courts and the results can be variable? Can you just explain a little bit more about how that would work?
Do you want me to
or is it very early days?
So initially we've obviously focused on the kind of first responses, which traditionally will be services like police but also with our fire and rescue colleagues, with the local authority. Children and family services, children's social care, adult social care are really key frontline services. So we've kind of focused on those first responses because both national research and feedback that we've got from local victims and survivors has said that initial response when they tell someone, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a social worker, whether it's a GP, that initial response is so crucial in terms of them feeling confident, feeling heard and feeling believed. And that's a really key message that came back from all of the victims and survivors we spoke to, that we need to make sure that they feel heard, they feel believed and they feel supported. So we've really tried to focus in on that initial response. But you're right, we absolutely need to look at that full journey through both the criminal justice process, which includes working with our CPS and courts colleagues, through to probation and youth justice services, but also recognising the impact of civil and family courts, that particularly when we're talking about issues around domestic abuse, that families who have separated may be going through the family court process, and that can be an opportunity for that abuse to continue. So we absolutely recognise that that's an area we need to look at, not just the criminal court process. And one of the things that we have done this year as a positive, part of the additional funding that Zoe has secured, is going to be used to employ a specialist IDVA who will support victims and survivors going through the family court process, who have ongoing child contact arrangements with their ex-partner who is a perpetrator of domestic abuse, so that they can provide that specialist support for family and civil court processes as well as any criminal court trials.
Do you think people that aren't around, this kind of violence don't appreciate that when someone actually puts their hand up or even just mentions it, they don't realise the sort of significance of what that person's doing? So to them they're just mentioning that their husband or partner did this, but to them it could be what is to them a small cry for help, but in reality it's a big thing, isn't it?
It is, it's huge for them, and it takes a lot of courage, I'm sure, to be able to put the hand up or speak out and say that. And I think we need to be really, mindful of that. I find as a society, we talk about it a lot, don't we? Violence against women and girls. But actually, somebody who's going through it can be just horrifically traumatising for them and their family. And for them to speak out takes a lot of courage.
And something we've spoken about in the past, there's been sort of general training, hasn't there, across the police to spot those signs.
There has been a lot of investment in the police into being able to spot them, and a lot of training too, which is really good. Well, one thing I do want to land is that the amount of additional funding that we've secured for just this year from the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office as well, we've almost tripled our funding for this year because we've been able to get some additional money from the government's focus on safer streets. There's 100,000 there, which for stalking across the county as well. So there's a lot going on and a lot of hard work being done.
So just to kind of wrap things up then, so in a way, we're trying to talk to different groups of people here, aren't we? We're talking to those that are maybe victims, those that maybe know people that are victims, and professionals perhaps that want to understand more, about the area. What's kind of what do they need to do for now, maybe those different groups?
Well, through my strategy, Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, so we've created a strategic board which meets twice a year with our partners. So our partners, I've already chaired one of the boards, so it's coming together, and in working together we can do so much more. So finding out what is everybody doing in this space, what more can we do, and what we can do together. So that's really important. That's a big piece of work that's happened. So we'll be able to do a lot more.
So, but talking specifically to the victims, you sort of said earlier about there is kind of links to resources on your website. In a way, what's the call for action just at the moment then from the public?
For me, it's about raising awareness so we can have these conversations, and it's about victims knowing that there's so many support services out for them, and that if they want to access them, they can. They just need to go onto my website and be able to see what is out there for them.